What's up everyone? Happy New Year once again. This will probably be my second video for the year. And just wanted to do something a little bit different, like I mentioned in my first video where I let you guys know, what to expect for 2026. So along those lines, this video is going to be about myself. So just to give you guys a little bit of insight into the person behind the camera, I was inspired by a relatively new YouTuber, NSX YouTube guy, and follower on Instagram. That's how I became aware of him. Shout out to, I think his name is Jay at 24th Gear. He got an NSX not too long ago and started a YouTube channel about it. And hit that in his Supra, and he kind of just inspired me in terms of he was talking about what to do with his channel and everything like that. And I was actually really invested. I became really invested as I watched that video in him, and I was like, you know what? And it was the only video I watched at that point. And I said, you know what? It's really interesting getting to know the person behind the camera and what their thoughts were. And so I haven't done really anything like this. Only done a couple of other interviews on like other YouTube channels like Automotive Anatomy. And so yeah, I just kind of want to give you guys like a kind of a Wikipedia of Chris Lum, shortened version, of course, and mainly talk about like my early life and then career and things that kind of have to do with the automotive space in particular. So let's get into it. So yeah, my name's Chris Lum, obviously pronounced Lum, L-U-M, not Loom. That's an ongoing thing where people don't know how to pronounce my name, last name. But I am 41 years old and I am born and raised in Southern California. So I was born in San Diego, California. I lived there up until basically when I was 18 and graduated college, and then I came up to Irvine to go to college, UC Irvine. But yeah, born and raised in San Diego. I grew up specifically in the Claremont area. So that was that always was like central San Diego to me. And then my parents split, and then I ended up basically doing half my time in like Del Mar area, and half of my time in North Park area. And this is before North Park became really nice and fancy. For those of you who know North Park, San Diego, from back in the day, it was pretty rough. But it was still a decent area, just not nearly as nice as it is now, or expensive as it is now. So yeah, basically I grew up in San Diego. I am full Chinese. Parents are both Chinese. My parents are, I think they are considered, well, I'm considered, I think, third generation. So my grandparents immigrated here, and my parents were born here. I was born here. Actually, my grandmother on my father's side was born in Oregon, and then went to China after that. But anyway, so as far as that goes, like most kids who are into cars these days, I grew up with, influenced by my father, who put, car toys like Hot Wheels and car models. He always had, growing up, I remember he always had 1/18th scale Burago model cars. I remember specifically the F40, Ferrari F40, that was super nice. It had the tabs that opened up, that you could open up the clamshells with. You would actually pull the tabs open to be able to open up the front clamshell and the rear clamshell. I thought that was really cool, really accurate, right? Always wanted to play with it. He never would let me play with it because they're not toys, right? They're model cars. I would always remember going to Toys R Us, and they used to have a gigantic model car section, die-cast car section back in the day, and you would get those cars for what, like $20 or something like that, right? So I always grew up around that. So what you have to know about my dad, who got me into cars, is that he was heavily into cars, and his father was heavily into cars as well. Right when he was in his late teens and his early 20s, he had a bunch of Chevy cars. So he had a 62 Impala with, Hurst shifter, and he always modified his cars too. So he's huge into modification, which is probably where I got that from as well. So yeah, he had a 62 Impala with a Hurst shifter. He had a 57 Chevy Model 210. It was apparently a 283 cubic inch engine that he had bored out to a 301 with a 4-barrel carb. He had a Chevy 2 which is along the lines of a more people know about like a Nova, but Nova is like a higher end model of the Chevy too. Before all of them became Novas, apparently. This is just what he's told me. I really don't know much about domestics. And he also had a '69 Camaro. So he's always been like a GM guy, Chevy guy specifically. And I think that's also why he has a Pontiac GTO these days, the Holden Pontiac GTO. So, needless to say, he's been always been in the cars. Besides those, in his older life, like when I was born, he had me when he was 40. I remember he had a FB RX-7, a Mazda RX-7. And then he had before that, I guess, he had a 356 Speedster back in the day. And then also the latest car when I was a little bit older was a 1990 300ZX 2+2 non-turbo. So yeah, he's a big reason I've always grown up around, the cars that he's modified, die-cast cars all over the house, and watching car stuff, watching car racing. Drag racing is what he was into. He is proud of the fact that he grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. That's where he was born and raised. And back in the 60s, was just when he was a teenager. He talks about how like a lot of the people, his Chinese friends, were not into cars or racing at all. I guess apparently the Japanese guys were into cars, Japanese kids, but Chinese kids weren't. So he got a lot of his Chinese friends into racing that way and into cars. He may be one of the first of the Chinese kids that were into, street racing or modifying cars or drag racing cars in the Bay Area back then. So yeah, that was his upbringing a little bit, and along with how that affected me. And probably one of my earliest memories I like to bring up of that kind of exposure too is that when I was probably, I don't know, 10 or so, around there, he had his 300ZX taken into Real in National City, San Diego, Ronnie's Electronic Autoland. I'm not sure if they're still there, but they were there for a while, so a bunch of you from San Diego probably remember them. They were like a car audio place, but they also did like performance stuff for cars. And he had gotten a GReddy exhaust system, funny enough. And so he was getting that installed, and I remember that at that point I wasn't even in the cars because I was bored out of my mind while he was getting that installed. It probably took like a couple hours for them to install it, while we waited. And so yeah, he was doing that stuff. He had NK wheels on his cars, on his Z, and he had Recaros and his RX-7. You can see a couple posts on my Instagram about that. I'll post some pictures here too. But yeah, so he was a really big influence, and he is a really big influence. He's still into crazy and modified cars. You should go check out my video on his Pontiac GTO that I helped him modify more. And those parts, of course, he chose. I didn't choose anything for him. He wanted to slam his car. He wanted to put a carbon fiber lip on his car and all that stuff. So yeah, he's a really, really crazy car nut. So that's kind of what started the younger my base, right? And then once I got to driving age, my parents, I was lucky enough to be brought up in I would say firmly middle class family, right? We weren't rich, but we weren't poor either. And my parents being of the boomer generation, right? There's memes about how fortunate the boomer generation was, especially as compared to us millennials and so forth. So they got lucky. They were able to purchase multiple properties back in the day for dirt cheap compared to now, right? But they were able to treat me to a decent car for my first car. I remember I got my car even before I got my license. I got, first of all, my dad was teaching me manual on, he had also, besides his sports cars, he had a Chevy Blazer manual, 2-door, which I learned how to drive in. And then I learned how to drive in his 300ZX also. I think I do have some video of that, so I'll try to post some video of that if I can. I would learn how to drive in the 300ZX in a parking lot generally in San Diego. There's the the bay. And so there's big old parking lots at the beach, especially where they launch boats at the docks. And so that's where we went to go practice driving. And so I started practicing driving, off and on casually, like when I was 13 years old in parking lots. And then once I got my learner's permit at 15, I actually had my parents helped me purchase my first car when I was 15, actually 15 and a half, something around there, so that I could practice driving in my own car. So yeah, very fortunate. I understand. There's some people, I had friends that, got cars that were like $3,000, $4,000, So I had gotten a 96 Integra GSR for $12,500 around there. It had like 68,000 miles on it. It was green with tan interior. I think it was like a one or two owner car. It was in good shape, and it was a GSR in the hands of a 16-year-old, and so I was very lucky. I learned how to drive in that car. I remember I learned how to drive in that car. I spent so much time learning how to drive in that car, specifically, that I got a cramp in my calf muscle on my clutch leg, my left leg, and it wouldn't allow me to sleep because it was the kind of cramp where it just pulsated all night long. And because I was just practicing so much. I practiced so much because I was also planning to take the driver's test in that car, in my manual. Lowered, it was already lowered, GSR. And I passed on my first time in that car because I was so well prepared and had been driving so long up until that point. But I would say at this point, I would like to point out that I'm probably not going to go too in depth in my cars. Because I'm planning to make a separate video detailing kind of my history of cars. So look out for that. But I will briefly mention the cars that I've owned in this video. This video is going to be primarily about like my life and influences in the automotive industry and things like that. So yeah, that was my first car, and so when I and even before that, I was obviously a freshman in high school before I got my license, and I was influenced also by the seniors that were at high school. I went to Torrey Pines High School, which was in a pretty affluent area. It's a public school, but the students there were pretty well off in Del Mar and Carmel Valley in that area. So the seniors, I remember, made a big deal. This is when I was like still trying to find myself. I didn't really know where I fit in. A lot of the people were surfers, skaters, and those were cool, right? But I didn't necessarily fit in with those people because I didn't surf or skate, and I wasn't a white dude. Not supposed to be a racist comment, but those areas, there was mainly white people and rich white people, and they surf, skate, snowboard, all that. And those were the cool kids. I didn't, have a whole bunch of Asian friends at that point, but I did meet some people that kind of took me in under their wing. And then I ended up kind of like seeing that this group was a bunch of Asian dudes, and they had this cool lifestyle that I had never experienced before, right? So going back to the seniors, I go in as a freshman, and the seniors here in this Asian group of kids were cool. They had the cars, right? So their cars is probably what you guys want to hear about. There were people that they were all done up. So first of all, they were like show quality level cars, and they're seniors in high school, which was left a big impression, right? So they had the full. This is back in early 2000, late 90s, early 2000s. So 99, 2000. I think I was a freshman in like 99 or 2000. 99, I think. I graduated high school in 02. And so this was at the height of like Fast and Furious age. So this is before Fast and Furious came out, but the trends were like the ricey style stuff that we call rice now, right? And so there were big body kits, and all that stuff, big wheels, 17-inch, 18-inch wheels on your front wheel drive Hondas. So these guys had full body kits, full paint jobs. They had turbo kits. They had interiors done, racing seats, all the whole 9 yards that you would see at your hot import nights, your show off car shows and all that. And it was just, I was just like, wow, dude, these guys are cool. They got like turbo Integra GSRs, turbo Accords, turbo Del Sols. And so, I was like, wow, this is a, these guys are cool. And that's kind of what I strived for, right? Those were my kind of like role models at the time too, to a certain extent. Even though myself and my peers, my friends at my age, the fellow freshmen, we didn't have as much money as them. But those were the cool guys that we sought to be like. So they made a big impression, and that's kind of what got me like heavily into cars as well. Is just seeing that lifestyle, and then being introduced to all the car shops, and all that. So graduated high school. I did very well in high school. I was always a pretty decent study. I don't like to study, but I did well enough in high school that I graduated with, above a 4.0 grade point average. I wasn't smart enough to get into like UCLA or UC Berkeley, but I got into UC Irvine, and that was good enough for me. And of course, back then it was called University of Civics and Integras, University of Chinese Immigrants. So, based on what I just told you of how I was got impressioned in high school, UC Irvine fit right in with my with what I was where I was wanting to go, and went to UC Irvine. So I left San Diego, went to Irvine, and I ended up being. I was always a big, and still am a pretty big introvert and quiet guy, and so that mixed with the fact that one of my older cousins, he stressed to me. I think he went to UCLA. He stressed to me, "Hey, don't get sucked into those fraternities." He didn't go into specifics, but he kind of just said like it was a waste of time. You don't need that kind of thing. So I was like, I took it as face value. I was like, yeah, okay, I don't need it. I've always been the type of person that I have a strong sense of. It's funny that I'm about to say strong sense of self, considering that I just mentioned how I was trying to find myself. But you're all trying to find yourself when you're younger, right? So once I landed on who I wanted to be, I have a strong sense of of willpower, and what I mean is like I've never very straight edge. I've never done drugs. I never smoked a cigarette because I felt like I didn't want to. And there's people that have urged me. There's people that have said, "Hey, I don't." So what I'm saying is like I don't fall to peer pressure. I'm very strong willed in that way. People that told me to drink, I didn't want to drink. I didn't drink until my 23rd or 24th birthday, something like that. People know that they couldn't force me. I'm smart enough to not get peer pressured into doing something that I don't want to do. And so, not that you're not smart if you're peer pressured, but for me, I'm very proud of the fact that I I stick to my guns, basically, right? So anyway, he told me not to join any fraternities. I was like, okay, that's fine. That makes sense. That's good enough for me, right? So basically didn't do much in college except for I found a car club. And this was the first year that the UCI car club was announced, was my freshman year. And it was called Imports at UCI at that time. And I went to the first car show at the top of the social sciences parking structure, which is one of the biggest structures at UCI at the time. And it was massive. The car show was massive. It was a big hit. And then I was like, okay, that was my first event for the car club. And then started to go to the meetings. I was like, oh, they have like weekly or whatever meetings. I start to go. I learned that the president has the same last name as me, Lum, Zach Lum to be specific. And so it's a rare name for those of you who are Chinese or who are Asian and may or may not know. The Lum last name is pretty rare. There is a bunch in San Francisco and in Hawaii, but that's about it. And so I was like, okay, I gotta go meet this dude. I gotta go see what's up. The car club is the only kind of thing I was interested in that time, extracurricular I was interested in at that time. And so I went and basically, I found my friends. I found my group, right? They were just doing car stuff, talking about cars, and I was like, I need some friends anyway, so I'm gonna make friends here. So long story short, I hit it off with those guys, and they did everything from tech days where I learned how to work on cars, which I didn't know how to do at that point. So I should mention that at this point I had just basically probably the most extensive thing I had done at this point was put a body kit on my car, a VIS Bomex style body kit on my Integra. But other than that, like take wheels on and off, that's about it. I barely knew how to install a short ram intake. I remember first time I tried to install an intake, I got caught up where, if you're familiar with the B series, they have a hard line that connects the PCV breather on the intake to the valve cover along with a coolant line. There are two lines that are stuck together, a hard line, and so you have to remove that when you put an aftermarket intake in, and so you're going to lose. You have to open up a small coolant line. It goes to the throttle body, and so that kind of thing, caught me up in the earlier days, and so I basically didn't know how to do anything to that car, and so I learned a lot through the tech days, and I'll get more into that in a little bit. But they did tech days, they did track days. I'll get into that too soon. And just talked about cars. They had guest speakers in the automotive industry, which you'll find out was pretty meaningful to me. So yeah, at this point in UCI in about 2002, 2003, I am heavily into the car club and well invested into the car club, where I'm joining everything that they're doing to the point where, when they're recruiting for positions in the cabinet, my name comes up as well, which we'll get into. So let's get into the kind of things that we did in the car club. They really molded me, right? Tech days. So tech days, again, I didn't know how to do anything. I learned a lot from them. They taught me a lot they were into track days, so they taught me a lot how to change brake pads, how to change brake lines, how to bleed the brake fluid, how to do oil changes, general maintenance, a little bit of modifications like putting seats in, bucket seats and things like that. They were so one of the things that I really take with me even to this day is that I always remember Zach Lum always said, when we're working on cars, he would say, like, don't give up, you can do it. And it sounds pretty corny and cliche to say that kind of thing to someone, but it's true. And I repeat that to myself constantly, even to this day, because back then I was a person that really gave up pretty easily. If something didn't go my way, or something wasn't going on the car or wasn't coming off the car easily, I'd be like, I throw my arms up, go, I'm kind of over this. I give up. I don't know what I want to do. Maybe I'll just won't install this thing. But he is just like, don't give up. You can do it. And so, as I've incorporated that over the years, I try to think to myself, like, especially Hondas, they're equated to Legos, right? These cars go together and are meant to come apart to a certain extent. So someone can do it. If anything, anyone can do it, I can do it. Sometimes it just needs the right tools. Sometimes it needs the right know-how, someone guiding you, which they were there. A lot of the people were there to guide me. And so just through that experience and getting all the tools over the years, I've learned to kind of get to the point where I am at right now. And a lot of it's just experience. And a lot of it, again, is just having someone being able to guide you at a certain point. Now, I would still like to have someone guide me, but I'm by myself in my garage, so I let the repair manual guide me. And that's kind of a big thing too, and how I get things done. So moving on from that, track days, okay? A lot of you don't know who are especially NSX guys who just met me in the last 5 years, but I used to go to the track a lot. track at UCI was brand new to me. I didn't have any idea. I've heard of drag racing, but I had no idea that people went around like circuit racing, took their cars around the circuit on the track. I didn't know where a circuit was in San Diego. There's no tracks like that down there, right? So I got up to Irvine. All of a sudden, these guys had come in and stripped out Civics where the grommets are gone in the bottom of the floor pan. You can see the ground through the car, and they're stripped out. They've got one seat or two seats in there. Zach had a EJ Civic Coupe, EJ8 or whatever. I don't know, the EK Coupe generation with a Type R engine in it, V18C5, and he was super fast. Another guy had Civic 2. Some people had Integra Type R's, and they were all into tracking, and it was just an entirely new world to me and super interesting. And so I went to my first track day with them, and I was hooked. Of course, I rode along. I rode along as a passenger, but I was hooked. It was super amazing. I would love the underdog effect of how, we're all in Hondas pretty much because we're young kids without a whole lot of money. We're in Hondas, and we're showing that the skill is what's allowing us to beat, cars with more than double the horsepower and more than double the worth, right? So that was obviously very fun to be a part of. And so once I experienced that, I started to have a purpose for my own Integra and how to build it in that way. So I started obviously putting a lot of track parts in it, learning how to upgrade what pads to get. We ran Hawk HP Plus exclusively pretty much back then. Some people ran Hawk Blues and the crazy track pads, but for those of us that streeted and tracked our cars, like Hawk HP Plus, a lot of us, the Apex N1 Pro suspension, the OG made in Japan Apex N1 Pro, was the suspension of choice for a couple of us. I remember it had 16 kilogram front springs and 6 kilogram rear springs because, front wheel drive Hondas, especially stripped out, are super lightweight in the back, so you don't need a stiff spring. And so I just built my car in that way. Eventually I put in bucket seats, stripped out the interior, just did chassis reinforcement, sway bars, sticky tires, and just went out to have fun. When we were in college, we never chased times, at least myself and my immediate friends. Why? Because we never had enough money or never wanted to put out money for the transponder. I think it was only like 20 or 40 bucks extra at that time. And track days were only like $100 back then, 100 to 120. But going through Speed Trial USA, some of you OGs might remember them. That's even before, I'm not sure if Speed Ventures was around back then, but I remember we eventually went with Speed Ventures after Speed Trial. And this is when you had to tech at an external shop where there was no self-teching. You had to go to a shop. So we had a relationship with Cause USA, Cause LSDs. I think they were in Costa Mesa around there, and they would tech for us. And so basically we tried to go out to, we planned like a club track day every quarter. UCI is based on the quarter system. So we tracked at least every quarter, if not more. And so basically for me and my track experience, I tracked basically from my 2004-ish, 2003, 2004-ish, multiple times a year, all the way till off and on, all the way up until 2017-ish or something like that. And so I used to track more heavily when I was in my 20s, and gradually got less and less basically. So that's where my appreciation grew for basically building a Honda for what they're good for performance wise, right? Some people build Hondas for drag racing or whatever, but we all know that Hondas are really meant to go on like a circuit track. And that's kind of where that kind of philosophy of building was instilled in me. So I always, from then on, suspension and chassis was always a big part of it. I was never a really big power guy in terms of modifying my cars. And then to fast forward, again, I won't talk too much specifically about my cars, but why I got out of tracking eventually is that I always my philosophy for tracking was always that I never wanted to track an expensive car. Like my S2000 I only tracked once. I tracked it once when I first got it, just to get it out of my system and kind of get us to see how the car was. But after that, I put too much money into it, and that I basically didn't want to risk it. So I always made sure I tracked a cheap car. And for me, the cheap car was always my daily driver, Integra. My Integra, while it was my only performance car in the beginning, once I got my S2000, my Integra just became like my daily, basically, and track car. And that dynamic existed for a long time. My entirety of my 14-year S2000 career, I basically had a daily driver Integra slash track car available to me. And so I did not feel bad about tracking the Integra because it was always, back then, worth very little. Now they're worth, they're hard to get and very sought after, clean Integra, but back then, if you crashed it, Kelly Blue Book would give you like $3,000 or $4,000, right? Or would value your car at that much, right? And so I was like, I'm not going to buy track insurance. I don't even know if track insurance was a thing back then. I don't think it was. That's back in the day when people would, if they crash on the track, they would do insurance fraud and, tow the car out to the street and say they got into an accident on the street. But, that's part of the reason why I never tracked an expensive car, right? So eventually I got sick of so fast forward to like 2017, 2018, I eventually went to, lots of different tracks: Streets of Willow, Button Willow, Chuckwalla, even Laguna Seca. Laguna Seca was amazing. I really want to go back, but my first time was very nerve-wracking there. But I want to go back a second time just to see how much my nerves have calmed down from that. But because that's obviously a world-class track. I blew my motor. I had a Type R motor. Fast forward again, at this time at Chuckwalla, I'm on my like sixth Integra, and I had a Type R motor in a 96 RS, and I blew the Type R motor at Chuckwalla, and that kind of basically was the nail in the coffin for my track time, because at that point I was just kind of over it. I was just going to the track because it was something to do. And I blew the motor, and I was like, you know what? I'm kind of over it. I'm just gonna, focus on my other car and build it how I want it. So that's in the future. So let's go back to UCI Car Club. So I talked about tech days. I talked about track days. The third thing was that in Irvine there happens to be a lot of car companies. So a lot of you may not know, but OC and LA is kind of was a mecca of like OEMs and aftermarket car companies. So like Nissan USA used to be here. Hyundai and Kia are still here. Honda obviously is still here in LA. Toyota used to be here in LA. And these are all USA, North American corporate offices that I'm talking about. Ford used to be here, or they still are. I'm not sure where they are now. They used to be here right in Irvine. Famous Cars and Coffee there. Mazda, right? Especially when Mazda used to owned by Ford. I think Mazda R&D or is something are still here. Jaguar used to be here along with Ford, right? And then so those are OEMs. And then aftermarket wise, like Sparco USA is here. GReddy USA is here. Apex USA used to be here and still is here. What are the other companies? HKS, I think, used to be here too. Tane USA is still here in Downey. Lot of big companies in the aftermarket industry. OGs used to be here, right? Because obviously this is, the West Coast is the port. A lot of Asians live here. And this is where the first port is from Japan, right? So a lot of the JDM parts came in the Long Beach port, LA, and this is where a lot of the companies decided to set up base. So I mentioned how we used to have speakers come in. At one point, we had a person come in from Extreme Dimensions, which is a body kit company. I think they're still around. Extreme Dimensions slash Carbon Creations is their carbon line. A basic carbon body kit company, much along the lines of Viz Racing, VIS, a lot of those other defunct fiberglass body kit companies now. Back then, there were a ton of them, and so he came in, spoke to us, and then he basically at the end said, we're looking for interns, and which was basically code for they're looking for cheap labor. So I fell for it. I got in there, and I wanted to get into the industry. So I should point out at this point, while I did do well in high school, in college, I was less focused. I wasn't stupid in college. I think I still had above a 3.5 grade point average. I think I graduated with like a 3.6 or some 7 or something like that, or 3.5. I don't know. It's along those lines, right? But I graduated with a degree in the social sciences area. I wanted to badly be a mechanical engineer. That's where my heart is. I always loved, like most dudes, I always loved Legos and taking things apart and putting them together. And I'm always into art as well, drawing and stuff like that. So I wanted to kind of design. I was like, oh, I want to design parts. I took a CAD class in UCI and things like that. But where I was never strong with is mathematics. And so engineering, you have to be strong in that. I did very poorly in calculus and that kind of trigonometry, that kind of area, and math in high school and in college. And so I quickly found out that I could not take, I had to change from mechanical engineer. I had to get out of that. And so I took, long story short, those of you know, I ended up working for GReddy. And because I was on GReddy and halfway through college, I kind of was like, you know what? I'm in the automotive industry now. I can just, I'm just going to graduate UCI and have a degree and be done with it. Doesn't matter that it's in social sciences. And so anyway, going back to the speaker, I felt I volunteered to be an intern at Extreme Dimensions, which was they obviously tried to make it seem like it wasn't just a filing papers, that we would actually learn something, but it was just filing papers, filing invoices, and kind of updating some spreadsheets. And so it was pretty bad experience. I remember I quit over voicemail. So I had done my full like quarter or 2-quarter internship, and then I decided to stay on. And then at that point I was getting kind of sick of it. My boss, a dude named Jerry, he was like not super cool. He was very strict. And I remember like, I think you could only purchase something like once a month or something like that, or maybe once every 6 months with a discount, with an employee discount. And then I wanted to purchase like 2 things before I left, and he gave me a hard time with that, even though I had spent like many months there without purchasing anything. And so that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I was like, this guy, not only did he kind of lie about the internship, he just wanted like a free work, free labor. He was giving me a hard time with the employee discount stuff. A bunch of the other workers were cool, but my manager just was not. So yeah, I liked a bunch of the other cool employees. They were really cool. So, but yeah, anyway, so I purchased like a JDM front end carbon fiber hood for my car, and they were able to get me an OEM JDM Integra core support. So I purchased those 2 items from them, and then I bounced. And then later on in the car club, so at that point, I think the car club had made me external relations officer or something like that, either right after this or before or after I got a job at GReddy. So GReddy had one of the guys in the cabinet made a post that showed that GReddy was looking for a part-timer in the warehouse. And so I immediately jumped on that because that one was going to be paid a lot more. I don't think I was getting paid. I might have been getting paid at Extreme Dimensions, but I'm not sure. I don't think so. So the GReddy job was paid, and it was part-time, and I needed part-time because I was in school still. And so they were able to work with me, GReddy. I got a job at GReddy. It was a warehouse job, so there's basically no, I did interview, but you don't really need to. Anyone could work there, right? For in the warehouse, you just not need to not be stupid and like run over people with a forklift, right? So I started at GReddy in 2004. Again, this is halfway through my college. I went to college from 2002 to 2006, and in the warehouse. So what I did was unpacked, 40-foot containers from Japan, heavy exhaust systems. Some exhaust systems weighed up to 80 pounds. Put them on pallets, put them away on racks, sent them out to, at the end of the day, you would ship them out in 40-foot containers, to the USA. And that's basically all I did for a couple of years until I graduated college. And then I asked Kenji, hey, I'm graduating college. I would like to still work here. Do you have anything for me? And so at that time, and probably at most places, right? Like the warehouse job is considered the lower level job. Obviously, you're doing a lot of manual labor and getting sweaty. You're out there in summers unpacking 80-pound exhaust systems. And, Kenji was like, yeah, we would love to keep you, Chris. We can open up a position for you in R&D, in research and development. And so I jumped on it. I was like, oh, this is amazing. Obviously it comes with a pay raise. And that was like that was probably one of the most prestigious jobs at GReddy, right? There's basically, first of all, GReddy is a very small company, which a lot of people were not aware of. At that point, probably only 20 something people, where there's probably less now even. But there's basically accounting department, sales department, sales and marketing department, R&D, and I think that's about it. R&D did tech support as well. Oh, and warehouse. And so in R&D, I did tech support where I answered phone calls. That was probably one of the most difficult parts because I wasn't well versed in like e-manage, which a lot of people aren't, right? So e-manage questions were really tough. E-manage and e-manage ultimate. But tech questions about how to, use boost controllers. I made a post a while back that like one of my first videos on YouTube was, has a lot of views. It was under my GReddy account name, which I think is GPPAP2 or something like that. It's how to change your boost controller, your Profect B Spec 2 from KPA to PSI, I think, since it was like not straightforward. So I did that on YouTube. And so tech support, and then the more glamorous part of R&D is that we helped prototype exhaust systems, and so, or not only exhaust systems, but prototype products. So exhaust systems and turbo kits. So most of the product came from Japan, and what was able to fit on US spec vehicles, we just sold as is. But, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be tested on US spec vehicles and then subsequently possibly modified to fit US spec vehicles. And so we would get parts from Japan, either full exhaust systems and modify those, or create exhaust systems from scratch and then send them back to Japan to get them produced. And so that's kind of how the prototyping process works. Same for turbo kits, right-hand drive versus left-hand drive. We get a turbo kit from right-hand drive Japan, not the company, some from right-hand drive vehicles in Japan, from Trust Japan, and then we test fit them on US spec vehicles, and then decide what needs to be changed and updated, send it back to Japan, and then they would create, the appropriate North American spec left-hand drive turbo kit. I also rebuilt turbochargers as they came in. And so it was really a good time. I remember when I was in R&D, I'd be responsible for, finding cars to test fit stuff on. And so we would always need to have, we need to, modify these exhaust systems like I just mentioned, and we need to test them and test the modification on cars. And so a lot of my friends from UCI, by this time I had, the UCI car club at my disposal. So I knew a ton of kids with cars that I'd always bring them in. And whenever you would let GReddy use your car for an exhaust system, for example, you'd get that exhaust system for free once it came into production. Once the production model came back to the US. So everyone was loving it. We'd borrow your car for like a day or two, and then in exchange, you get a free exhaust system worth like $300, $400, $500, right? Like pretty good deal for a college kid. And so that was really fun being that kind of connection between GReddy and the UCI kids. I also kind of led the way in towards the social media aspect. So forums at that time were social media. Facebook did exist, but it wasn't not anything like the Facebook now, right? So back then, I communicated with the general public via the forums, and so I had like a screen name for every forum at that time, and that's where I would post like, hey, we need this vehicle, we need this vehicle, we need this vehicle. If you have it and you want to let us borrow your car, you get a free exhaust system in return. Bring it on by. And so that was always really fun to do as well. So eventually, I learned a lot of GReddy. It was a really good experience. I made a lot of connections. I wish I had made more connections because back then I was just younger and more introverted still. And but made a lot of connections in the industry. Whether it was most of the connections are obviously through GReddy dealers and people that wanted GReddy discounts. And so, we scratch their back, you scratch mine, I scratch your back kind of thing, right? At GReddy is when I got my S2000. So 2007, so I left GReddy at 2008, but in 2007 is when I bought my S2000 AP2, 04 AP2. And again, I mentioned I tracked it right away. I put Tane Super Racing Coilovers SRCs on it, which were super serious because again, like I mentioned, I was very into tracking the car at that time, tracking my cars at that time. And so when I got to this S2000, I was like, first thing I got was a roll bar and suspension and some tires. And so SRC was like the most serious suspension I could get for the S2000 at that time. It was 16 kilogram springs, all four corners. It was like, pretty expensive suspension. It was like retail in the high 2000s at that time, but I think I got it for like $1,600 because of my hookup price with, Tane. We had a good relationship with Tane. And so later on in 2007, we happened to need a AP2 to prototype the turbo kit on. I did not plan that out at all. It was just a happy coincidence. And then Kenji was like, hey, can we use your car? I was like, oh, yes, please. Because I knew that I would be able to keep the turbo kit, right, at the end of it. So we prototyped it on my car. We did carb testing we did carb testing on a different car. But the kit eventually became carb legal, which was amazing. To roll around SoCal in a boosted S2000 that's fully legal. So that car made 300 wheel horsepower at peak, at high boost, and that was super fun. So, GReddy was a great experience. Met a bunch of good people through it, but I had to move on. Right at that point, in R&D, I was making less than $30,000 a year. And so this was 2004 to 2008. So I left in 2008. While I was at GReddy, I had mentioned that I was getting prototyping exhaust, help getting people to prototype exhaust systems. Well, I was on the Acura Zine forums, and a gentleman named Eugene had a 3.2 TL, and he said that he was able to get a group together for exhaust systems for that car, 3.2 Acura TL, which no one had an exhaust system for at that time. So we had enough people to get a group buy exhaust system designed and developed and created. And he happened to work at Kia Motors America. So this is the Kia Motors North American headquarters right here in Irvine. And I hit him up, and he said, yeah, you know what? I got a job here that we're looking for someone. And it was an entry-level-ish job into the OEM space, OEM manufacturer space. And I was like, I took it, Immediately, I think my salary jumped by at least $10,000 a year. And so I was like, I was loving it. I was like, this is great. What I did there at Kia Motors was essentially an inventory planner. And so I was a national inventory planner for Kia Motors remanufactured parts program. If you didn't know, OEMs have remanufactured parts. And so for Kia specific, every OEM does. And for Kia specifically, it was remanufactured engines, transmissions, audio units, radios basically, AC compressors, alternators, and starters. And so those parts need to get stocked into the dealer network or stocked into our warehouses, our national warehouses, and in order for the dealers to order them. And so I was responsible. It was myself and my boss, which was like a 50 or 60-year-old Korean dude. He was the leader, but I basically did all the dirty work. I was the inventory planner. He was the dude that made the decisions. And so what you had to do as an inventory planner is look at trends of demand. You look at national demand, what part numbers. It's all about part numbers. What part numbers sell, what amount, how many I have to order in from Korea or from our new stock, seed stock. So you seed a reman program through seed stock, which is brand new parts. As reman parts start breaking or not being able to be used in the remanufactured cycle, you need to seed the remanufactured cycle with new parts. And so I would order new parts and reman parts. Our remanufacturers were in the USA and in Mexico. And so I would place orders with these companies. And then so eventually I was forced to become an employee of what's called Mobis Parts America. And so Mobis Parts America is, I always say, is the equivalent of Denso to Toyota. So Mobis Parts and Denso are both tier 1 parts suppliers. What that means is tier 1 is a company that supplies parts directly to the OEM. And so in the case of Mobis, Mobis supplies parts to Hyundai and Kia. Most of you know Hyundai and Kia are very sister companies. Mobis is the third sister, and they all have kind of like an ownership triangle in each other. And so what I meant by I was forced to become an employee of Mobis is that Hyundai and Kia in 2009, I think it was, decided that, or the Hyundai Kia Group and Mobis wanted to form a Mobis Parts America. Previously, there was not a Mobis Parts America. There was just a company called like MPLA. Anyway, Mobis Parts America, MPA, was formed. They needed to get people and basically create it with some people. And how they did that was they took the entire parts departments. I'm not talking about dealer parts. I'm talking about OEM national office, national corporate office parts departments. So all the inventory, national inventory planners like myself from Hyundai and Kia, they took them from Hyundai and Kia and made Mobis parts. And so there was no longer any Kia Motors inventory planners, no longer any Hyundai inventory planners. We all became Mobis parts inventory planners. And when that happens, a lot of you know when companies merge, there are duplicates of every job basically, right? And so the remanufactured parts program being like one of the smaller programs, we got to cut people. And luckily, I made the cut. And so I ended up leading both Hyundai and Kia. Well, I shouldn't say leading because my boss was still there. But I ended up being still the only person essentially planning now both Hyundai and Kia remanufactured parts. And Hyundai also did the same exact remanufactured parts plus like distributors, I think, or something like that. And so that got kind of annoying. They did the typical corporate thing where they double your job responsibilities while keeping your pay the same. So that I was immediately upset and annoyed, and so I looked to go elsewhere. I wanted to go to I sought to transfer to a different part of Mobis Parts, which was their accessories division. So prior to MPA, there was MPLA, which I just mentioned, and they were in charge of doing accessories, like OEM accessories. So like think about when you go to a dealer and you have all those optional parts like floor mats, those like really kind of generic whatever parts like floor mats, shift knobs, pedals, little light kits, all those kind of whatever, ski racks, those kind of things, cargo stuff. That's what MPLA did, which is now, they're still, then they also joined as a part of MPA. So I joined them as like a sales analyst slash executive assistant to the national accessory sales manager. And I learned a little bit there. It was okay. It was fine. And at that point, I was doing okay, but someone had contacted me so during this time, I should say it's important. I should say this, that I had gotten experience as an inventory planner, and then on the accessory side, I got an experience as like an analyst. So doing more reporting. I was reporting to executives, reporting to management, doing like sales, graphs and spreadsheets and all that about how we're doing in sales and what we need to get more sales on and things like that. So someone at Mitsubishi Electric Automotive America contacted me from HR saying that they had a job open. So a little bit about Mitsubishi. A lot of you know the Mitsubishi cars. They obviously sell cars, but Mitsubishi does a lot of different stuff. So they have an entire division called Mitsubishi Electric. And Mitsubishi Electric, they did TVs, they did different electric components. They did like AC units, not only like mini splits like for garages, but for like entire offices, right? They do like big screens for like, ballparks, for like, Times Square type TV screens. They do elevators. So Mitsubishi Electric Automotive America is an subdivision of Mitsubishi Electric. And the Automotive America part is that they did rotating electrical. And so for automotive, rotating electrical is exactly what it sounds like. So that is not so much in use these days, but back then it's AC compressors, alternators, starters, distributors, etc. And so Mitsubishi Electric MEAA, they were a tier 1 and tier 2 part supplier. So I already said tier 1 supplies OEMs directly. Tier 2 are companies that supply tier 1s. And so we were tier 1 to some companies. We were tier 1 to Nissan, to Honda Acura. Not all Honda Acura, but some. Like for example, we did the alternator for the B18C5 Integra Type R engine, which I did get some of before I left. And so, but we also supplied, other remanufacturers as well. There are some companies like BBB that you might see on eBay or from AutoZone or from O'Reilly that sell alternators and starters. We would supply them too, companies like that. And so there, what did I do? It was also an analyst job. And so here we were analyzing, again, part numbers, pricing. It was in the sales. I was a sales analyst again. So it bridged the accessory side of MPA sales analysis with the remanufactured parts of my inventory planner side. So it bridged those two, and now I'm at Mitsubishi Electric doing kind of those two things together. with the Mitsubishi part numbers. And so from there, Mitsubishi Japan decides that they want to close down the Mitsubishi Electric Automotive America branch. It's not going well. We're transitioning to hybrids and electric vehicles, and sales are going down for rotating electrical. And so with our office closing down, my boss, I made a lot of good friends there, and my boss helped me get in good with, I said, can you help me? I knew that my position being at the lower end of the totem pole in the sales group was in danger, and we're going to have layoffs. And so before I was able to get laid off, my boss helped me get a job at Mitsubishi Elevators. So another subdivision of Mitsubishi Electric. It's called vertical transportation. So still in transportation technically, right? But it's vertical. So elevators for office buildings, for apartment buildings, you know it. So I worked there for a couple years, and the people were good. The company was okay. The people were great. I loved working with my group, my sales group. Shout out to all of them. I really loved them. It was really fun. But for me, I could not work in non-automotive, and elevators just did not do it for me. In the 2 years I was there, I still struggled with learning certain things about the elevator because I was just not interested in learning about it. It was kind of a dry job. All I did was I was also, funny enough, in sales again. I was like a sales support for the people selling elevators. So what we would do is we would bid on jobs. Whether someone was putting up a new high rise in downtown LA, we would bid on that job and say, hey, we can put in, you're looking to get 10 elevators installed at like 50 floors. This is how much we could do it for you. So that was the job of the salesman. For me, I was looking, in order to bid on those jobs, we got to look at the blueprints. And so I would look at floor plans all day. I would highlight where the elevators are. I would make these spreadsheets saying like, it's this type of elevator. It's only a 2-floor. And so I think it should be a hydraulic elevator. Whereas, if it's a 50 floor, it needs to be a machine roomless MRL elevator. And so I was technically in the construction industry for a little bit for these 2 years. I went on my first construction site, which funny enough is like I passed by on my way to work now in my current job. I passed by this first construction site that I've been on. And so that was it was fun in that, it's a whole new world that I got to experience. But again, I wasn't interested in it to the slightest. I wasn't excited to do it. I wasn't excited to learn about elevators. I wasn't excited to better myself. When you are into something, you want to learn, you want to better your education and etc. So basically, I was there but I wasn't looking for other jobs at that time. What happened was one of the coworkers that I had at Mobis accessories side, she contacted me and was now, I think, a manager at Kelley Blue Book, Cox Automotive. And she said that, hey, we have a job. I think you would be a good fit. Do you want to interview? And I said, okay, let me take a look at it. And it's funny because so the company is Cox Automotive. This is the company that I currently work for. Cox Automotive, I've seen their ads, their job listings for a long time throughout like almost my whole career. And I just kind of never gave it a second thought because the logo was very generic and I didn't know I never really looked into it. It never really seemed exciting. And then not until I was interviewing or preparing for the job did I find out that Cox Automotive is actually a really big automotive company conglomerate. Like if you go to their website right now, you'll see that Cox Automotive owns a ton of really well-known automotive companies. So Kelley Blue Book, you all know, Auto Trader, you all know, Mannheim Auto Auctions, if you wholesale cars or a car dealer, you know them, V Auto, and there's so many more. We're basically I think we're considered like a tech company. And so we basically do anything in the tech automotive space. And so I ended up in the Kelly Blue Book group, where we configure vehicles for the website. So most people know Kelly Blue Book for like valuing your used cars. So yes, we do that. But if you go on our website, you can also build a new vehicle, like as if you were on a manufacturer's website and trying to configure a new vehicle to purchase. You can also do that on Kelly Blue Book's website. And so that's currently what I do right now. And so it took a lot of, I felt at home, and it's probably the most comfortable I've ever been in an interview, where that I felt like every job that I've had up to this point in my life really prepared me for this. And it takes something from every other job, meaning like it takes a lot of analysis, which I did in all of my sales analysis roles. It takes automotive knowledge, which obviously I had at this point, and it takes a very detailed person. And at this point, I really felt like, across all my analysis jobs and everything like that, I was that kind of person. And so kind of put all those things together and into one job, and I felt like it was perfect for me. And so far I'm really loving it, and it's really I've really excelled at it. And for those reasons I mentioned, I think I feel like it was made for me. So I was really excited for this job, and I'm still doing that today. And so it's constantly evolving, of course, with AI and everything like that, but I can't get into all that, otherwise they're going to fire me. But everyone's getting into AI and trying to figure out how to survive in the AI space. But yeah, so that's essentially where I'm at. I've been working at this point in automotive industry since 2004, and it's about to be 2026, and I spent basically like 2 years or so out of it. So that's essentially 20-ish years as an automotive professional, is what I like to say, because that's as a career, that's what I've been doing for those 20-ish years. And I appreciate my experience too. I appreciate the fact that I've worked in these quote unquote lower levels, being in the warehouse and doing that kind of thing, all the way up to R&D, to in the office doing analysis roles, and now to the point where I'm doing pretty good for myself and still in the office, right? I didn't mention my very first job was in high school, and it was at a dry cleaners. I started my very first job at 15 and a half or 15 years old. I remember I had to get a work permit back then. I was working for minimum wage, which was $5.75 at the time, maybe even $5.25. I can't remember. $5 something. And that was basically just to get gas. I mean, that is nothing, right? So I've been working straight since I've been 15, only taking a break for maybe a total of 2 to 3 years. So I think that, I did get a job when I was 15. I think I quit when I was like a junior or senior, so I could focus on trying to get into college, focus on studying and my applications. And then I know I did not work my freshman year of college. But other than that, I've been working every year, whether it's, mainly to get gas money and car modification money. That's why I've always worked. I never worked because I wanted to work or get experience. I always wanted to work so I can have money to spend. And so, I've been, again, so fast forward, I've been working in automotive, and that's where I hope I stay, because that's where my passion is. But we'll see. I have other plans, like I mentioned in my first video of this year. And so other plans to branch out and hopefully start a company small parts company of my own that I can do on the side. I would love for that to be a nice supplemental income, but we'll see how that goes, right? I don't foresee that being anything that I'd be able to quit my job over, because there's just not that many NSXs out there willing to spend a ton of money on parts. The car is just not plentiful to begin with. It's a pretty rare car. It's just something that it would be kind of like a passion project, right? It's something, the car that, if I wanted to sell a bunch of parts, I would be making parts for like a Civic or something like that, right? Or a BRZ or 86 or something like that. So, but because I love the NSX right now and I have a bunch of ideas, that's kind of what the space that I want to get into right now. So that's kind of like the main thing I wanted to talk to you guys about today is, my a little bit of my background and how I became to where I am today, what kind of person I am. I briefly mentioned how I'm introverted and quiet person. I've always been like that. And so I think the YouTube space has also helped me kind of break a little bit out of my shell too. Force myself to be a little bit more outgoing, force myself to be a little bit more vulnerable, talk to you guys on camera. I didn't show my face on camera for like the first 1 or 2 years, just because I felt like I didn't need to. I felt weird. But that's a lot of the things. Those are a lot of things that really, reflect who I am at this point. Still battling on getting out there and talking to you guys in person and getting to know you all. Thank you for all of you people that come and talk to me. That makes it a lot easier on me. Introverts, it's easier for us to be approached than to approach people. So I always appreciate that. I always tell you guys, I appreciate that you come up to me and say hi, say, I've seen your channel, I've seen a video or two of yours. I like to meet you. I like to know that you are watching. Again, I don't know, necessarily who's watching my videos. I see a video, a watch count, but it doesn't tell me like what person is watching. So I appreciate when you guys do tell me that. Give me the feedback that you're watching and leave those comments on the video to let me know that you're watching, and that a video that I did may or may not have helped you, or something that I did wrong. I'm always open to criticism, so feel free to tell me if I did something wrong, or let me know what you would want to see in the future. So yeah, I think I've rambled long enough. This is a pretty long video. Sorry about that. Hopefully you have a little bit of a better idea of who I am, where I come from when I film behind the camera, where I come from when I make certain comments. I feel like I am at this point pretty well versed in the automotive industry, in the automotive space. Again, I don't pretend to act like I know everything about cars. That's definitely not what I'm saying. My channel is based on just being a normal guy learning about cars, and so hopefully that's the idea that you have gotten to from this video, seeing that how I'm not ASE certified. I've never been a professional mechanic. The closest thing I've been to a professional mechanic is working in R&D at GReddy. That was only for like 4 years or less than that, where I was just being trained. I did things alongside of other mechanics, and that's how I learned. Or whether it was learning from fellow classmates at UCI Car Club, or learn from other YouTube videos online. That's how I learn. But essentially, I have a lot of experience, I think, so far, 2 decades worth of experience in the automotive sector, whether it's aftermarket parts, whether it's the OEM space, OEM auto manufacturer space, and whether it's just my personal experience modifying cars and growing up in Southern California, growing up in this era where, where a bunch of us are modifying cars together. We have access to all these cool companies and speed shops and parts and resources. Like, I didn't talk about all the magazines that we all used to, look at back in the day, Honda Tuning, Import Tuner. I grew up with all of that. I grew up in that heyday, right? That was all very influential to me. And so it's always, that's all, everything that shaped me. The kids growing up these days have a completely different experience. They don't have I grew up with the forums. They don't have the forums. They don't have all the pictures are broken on Honda Tech and whatever. And Team Integra, I was on Team Integra a ton. That's where I learned all my everything. Team Integra, Honda Tech, S2KI. People nowadays don't have it. Their experience is completely different. Learning and modifying cars via social media. I can totally see if this is I don't know if this is happening, but I can totally see how people are failing to pass on certain knowledge these days. And that's the part of the reason why I also started this YouTube channel, was because I thought it was I saw that forums were dying and YouTube is going strong. And so hopefully YouTube is here for a long time, but it's not going to be here forever. There's going to be some other video platform that makes it big in the future. Who knows? But hopefully these videos will be up for a long, long time, and hopefully here to help you all out. And so I think that's it. Again, sorry for rambling. I rambled even longer, but that's me. Hopefully you learned something about me. If you have any questions, let me know. If you can relate to me, if you also grew up in San Diego. I know a couple of you that did grow up in San Diego that can share in the experiences around the same age as me. Ask your questions, make your comments in the comments below. Otherwise, I will see you out there, and you can look forward to more videos of me sitting here talking to you this year as well, whether I'm talking about, other opinions about certain things or breaking other NSX news to you. So look out for those videos this year as well. I'll see you then.